I married Molly 8 years ago. Along with her came her two sons, Evan and Kai. Their father, Brandon, lived in another city and showed up only occasionally, usually with flashy gifts and loud promises that vanished just as quickly as he did. All that time, I was the one who actually stayed, paying for school, driving them to practices, helping with projects, sitting by their beds when they had fevers. They didn't call me Dad, but I never pushed. I figured respect wasn't something you demanded. It had to be earned slowly through presence. So I stayed. Every year, every birthday, every scraped knee and late-night panic. I was there. I built that family with my bare hands. When Kai broke his wrist during soccer, I was the one in the emergency room holding his other hand while he cried. When Evan was failing math, it was me, not Brandon, who sat up with him night after night until the numbers stopped swimming. I took their tantrums, their silences, their cold shoulders. I told myself it was just growing pains, that one day they'd see. I even added them to my health insurance, set up college funds, gave up weekends, holidays, overtime shifts I desperately needed, all for them. I made sacrifices their own father never even considered. And somewhere in all of it, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, they saw me the same way I saw them, as family. But there were signs, small ones at first. Evan would get quiet when his father called, short, clipped answers like he was saving his real excitement for when I wasn't around. Kai once told a classmate I was just his mom's husband. And Molly never corrected them. Once, Evan asked me why I didn't have any kids of my own. I told him the truth. I could have, but I chose not to. I didn't say it, but I meant because I chose you. I figured that was enough. It wasn't. There was always this invisible tether pulling them away from me. Something blood deep and unquestioned. Brandon could vanish for 6 months and still walk through our door like he had a key to their hearts. Me? I had to earn my way into every single room, every conversation, every moment. And yet I tried. God, I tried. I drove Evan to his basketball games, even when he sat in the passenger seat with his headphones on, ignoring me. I picked Kai up from music lessons in the pouring rain while Molly was busy at work. I bought them laptops when they started high school. Not hand-me-downs, not second-hand, but brand-new machines I had to work weekends to afford. They didn't say thank you, but I told myself that was fine. That was just being a teenager. Gratitude would come later. It never did. I remember one night, Kai was sick, fever spiking, shivering under a mound of blankets. Molly had to stay late at the hospital. She's a nurse, so I stayed by his side, wiping his forehead, holding the bucket when he vomited. He looked so small that night, so breakable. And for a moment, he reached for my hand in the dark and whispered, "Thanks, Dad." Just once. Soft. Almost a slip. He never said it again. The next morning, it was like it never happened. He went back to Rick. My name. Not Dad. Not even stepdad. Just Rick. As though I were a roommate who happened to pay for everything. But I held onto that one word like a relic. A flake of gold in a river of mud. I tried talking to Molly about it once. We were sitting on the couch after the boys had gone to bed. She had a glass of wine in her hand, her legs curled under a blanket. I asked her if she thought they'd ever come to see me as a real parent. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "You're good to them. That's what matters." I wanted to ask her why she didn't ever say that in front of them. Why she didn't insist they show some kind of respect. But the words stuck in my throat, and I swallowed them, like I always did. Because what was the alternative? Rock the boat? Force something that had to come naturally? I kept quiet, and I kept giving. Every year, on their birthdays, I'd wake up early, decorate the kitchen, cook their favorite breakfast. I'd spend weeks hunting down the exact thing they wanted. Molly would help, of course, but it was always me doing the math. Me moving money from savings to make sure it all worked out. Their father never called on time. Sometimes not at all. But when he did, the joy in their voices, it was like gravity changed. Like the whole house leaned in his direction. Even when he forgot their birthdays, they still made excuses for him. He's busy. He lives far. He's trying. I was trying too. But my efforts didn't sparkle. They were invisible. Expected. I remember one Thanksgiving, Brandon showed up unannounced. He brought some cheap wine, a Bluetooth speaker, and stories about how well his business was doing. The boys flocked to him like puppies. Molly was polite, but I saw the tension in her jaw. I thought she'd ask him to leave. She didn't. Instead, he stayed for dinner, sat in my chair, made jokes about the turkey I had spent all day preparing. The boys laughed. Too hard. Like they were trying to impress him. I watched from across the table, carving silence into my plate. When Evan asked if Brandon could come for Christmas too, I looked at Molly. She didn't answer. She never answered when it mattered. But I held on. I told myself families were messy, that maybe they'd come around when they were older, when they had kids of their own, when they realized what sacrifice actually looks like. I told myself all the right lies, because the truth was unbearable. That I was building a future for two boys who might never see me as anything more than a placeholder. A wallet with legs. A warm body in the right place. Still, I kept showing up, because that's what I thought love was, not a feeling but a function. A set of actions, repeated without demand for praise. Then Brandon started calling more often. It began with the phone calls. Brandon's voice, once an occasional ghost through the speaker, started filling the house again. He'd call during dinner, during homework, sometimes late at night, laughing loudly through Evan's door while I sat downstairs pretending not to hear. The boys never hesitated to answer, never cared if I was nearby. First, Molly said nothing. She'd glance up from her book, her expression unreadable, then go back to pretending everything was normal. I tried to follow her lead. Pretend. Shrug. Swallow. It's just a phase, I told myself. Let them have their father. There's room for more than one man in their lives. But Brandon wasn't content with sharing the stage. He wanted it all. It started subtly. Evan stopped asking me for rides. Kai began double-checking anything I told him, like my words needed confirmation. They laughed more at Brandon's texts than anything I said. At dinner, they talked about the things he promised. A trip to Europe next summer. New phones. Help with tuition. A car. He said he's gonna get me a Mustang. Kai announced one night, grinning wide. Like brand new. Black. Leather seats. I paused mid-bite. That's generous. He said he's already talking to a dealer. Evan added. Molly lifted her wine glass without comment. I wanted to ask the obvious question. Has he ever followed through? But I didn't. I knew how it would sound. Bitter. Small. Jealous. So I smiled instead. And then the boys started comparing. I'd tell Evan to clean his room and he'd mumble that Brandon never made him do chores when they visited. I asked Kai to limit his screen time and he snapped. My real dad lets me play until 2 a.m. It landed like a slap. Real dad. I waited for Molly to speak, to correct him. She didn't. Later that night, when I asked her why she let them speak like that, she just shook her head and said, they're teenagers. They don't mean it. But they did. And the worst part? They weren't cruel. Not like villains. They didn't scream or throw things. They just removed me, bit by bit, shrinking my presence with every offhand remark, every sidelong glance, like I was fading from their family photo 1 pixel at a time. Still, I kept showing up. I reviewed Kai's college essays, even when he barely acknowledged my notes. I helped Evan with his FAFSA, filled in the parts Brandon never touched. When the tuition planning came up, I volunteered to front the costs until scholarships came through. Molly said thank you. The boys didn't. Then came the night it all broke. We were sitting around the dinner table, bowls of pasta cooling between us. I had printed out a breakdown of tuition options and student loans. Papers lay across the table. Real numbers. Real plans. Evan was scrolling his phone. Kai was stabbing at his food. Look, I said, sliding the paperwork across the table. I've already paid the first semester deposit. If we use the 529 account, it should cover the first year. Kai didn't look up. Why are you handling this? I blinked. What do you mean? He shrugged, voice sharp and cold. Shouldn't our real parents be dealing with this? The room went still. Evan froze mid-scroll. Molly's fork hovered above her plate. I stared at Kai. He looked back at me. Not angry, not even cruel. Just distant. Like he was talking to a stranger who had overstepped. My throat tightened. I've been managing this since. I know, he cut in. But maybe it's not your job anymore. There it was. The line drawn in blood I didn't share. I looked to Molly. Nothing. Not a word. Not even a flinch. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Evan looked away. Something cracked in my chest. A slow, precise break. Like the sound of glass cooling after fire. I stood slowly, gathered the papers, and walked out of the room. I didn't say a word. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk in the dark, the glow of the monitor painting my hands blue. I opened the folders I had built for them. Evan_tuition. Kai_college. I scrolled through the documents. Wire transfers. Grant applications. Health insurance cards. Dorm deposits. All of it meticulously tracked, saved, updated. Proof of my presence. Proof that I had mattered, even if they didn't want me to. And then I did what needed to be done. I opened the portal to the 529 account and removed myself as custodian. Canceled automatic tuition payments. Froze the debit cards I'd loaded with their allowances. I drafted emails to the financial aid offices, letting them know there would be a delay. New funding sources were being arranged. I didn't lie. I just left out the part about why. I logged into our health insurance portal and removed Evan and Kai as dependents. Click. Confirm. Done. I didn't feel rage. Not even sadness. Just a brutal stillness. A clean, surgical cold. If I wasn't a father, then I would no longer play one. The next morning, no one noticed. The world spun on. For 2 days, everything was quiet. Normal. Kai joked about a new video game. Evan asked Molly about his laundry. No one mentioned the college plans. No one asked about the emails. Then Evan's phone rang. I heard it from the hallway, a voice message from his university. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone. Formal. Concerned. He didn't say anything right away, but I saw the way his posture changed. The way his thumbs hovered over the screen like they didn't know where to press. That night, Molly found the envelope I'd left on the kitchen counter. Inside was a printed spreadsheet, every payment I had made for them over the last 8 years. Rent, food, school, clothing, insurance, travel, tuition. Over $180,000 in total. At the bottom I had written, if I'm not their father, then this was charity. She didn't confront me that night. She just stood in the doorway holding the paper like it was a lit fuse. The next morning, Evan's college called again. This time I let it go to voicemail. Kai knocked on my door around noon. Just a tap like he already knew I wouldn't answer. Later I heard them talking to Molly in the living room. Urgent whispers. Phrases like it's due and what are we supposed to do? And he said Dad would pay. Brandon, of course, had gone silent. No more promises. No car. No check. Just vanished. As always, that night Molly approached me. Her eyes were glassy. You made your point, she said softly. They're scared. I didn't reply. They didn't mean it, she added. You know that. They meant it enough to say it, I said. She looked at me like I'd become someone else. But the truth was, I was finally being myself, the version they had created with every slight, every dismissal, every rejection dressed up as teen angst. They're just kids, she whispered. I looked at her steady. And I was just the man who paid. She flinched, and for once she had nothing to say. That night, I lay in bed beside her, staring at the ceiling. The house creaked with silence, the weight of 8 years pressing down on me. Not with sadness, but with something sharper. Clarity. 2 weeks passed. The quiet didn't last. First, it was a phone call from Evan's school. A recorded message about a missed tuition installment and potential administrative holds. I heard it while walking past the landline, the robotic voice cutting through the air like a blade. I didn't touch the receiver. Then Kai's guidance counselor called Molly. She stood in the hallway, her voice hushed, nodding into the phone like the news wasn't a surprise. When she hung up, she didn't speak. She just looked at me, and I looked right back. I said nothing. I think that scared her more than shouting would've. The next day, Evan stormed into the living room, his laptop open, his voice already raised. "Did you shut off the tuition payments?" I didn't look up from my book. "Yes." "You can't just do that," he snapped. "I already did." His hands clenched the laptop like he wanted to hurl it across the room. "They're saying I can't register for next semester. They're holding my schedule, my dorm, everything." "You told me I wasn't your real parent," I said evenly. "So I let your real parent handle it." Kai stood in the kitchen, silent, his expression unreadable. Molly was behind him, frozen between intervention and retreat. Evan turned to her. "Mom, do something." She opened her mouth, closed it. She had no defense left. Her silence, the thing she'd always used to soften conflict, had finally backfired. It was now the loudest sound in the room. Kai spoke next. His voice was quieter, but sharp. "You took us off your insurance, too?" "Yes. You know I have asthma," he said, as if that mattered. I met his eyes. Then Brandon should have remembered when he promised to provide. That name, Brandon, hit the room like a dropped plate. Molly flinched. Evan scoffed. Kai muttered something under his breath and walked out. Brandon had vanished again. No more phone calls. No more promises. The last anyone heard from him was a voicemail that said he'd take care of it. That was 10 days ago. Now the bills were piling. The tuition office sent another warning. Evan tried calling him. I could hear the frustration bleeding through the walls. "Pick up, pick up, pick up," he whispered into the phone, over and over. "You said you would, Dad, come on." No one answered. The silence on the other end of that line sounded a lot like karma. Molly tried again a few days later. She waited until I left for work, probably assuming I wouldn't hear. But I did. I came back for my keys and caught her on the porch, phone pressed to her ear, voice trembling. "We can't cover this. I told you. No, I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for your sons." There was a long pause. Her shoulders sank. "Because he won't," she said finally. "He said he's done." I stepped back quietly and closed the door. That night, Evan sat at the table with a job application pulled up on his laptop. He didn't ask for help. He didn't look at me. He just typed in silence. His shoulders were rigid, his jaw clenched. Kai paced nearby, phone in hand, tapping messages furiously. I didn't say a word. The house began to feel different. Smaller, tighter. Not like a home, but like a sealed chamber where oxygen was running low. No laughter. No music. Just footfalls and whispers. The occasional sound of frustration. Drawers slammed. Doors clicked shut harder than necessary. Molly barely spoke to me. At dinner, she pushed food around her plate. She didn't ask how my day was. She didn't smile. Just sat in a silence she had helped build brick by brick. Then, one afternoon, Evan came home with grease on his hands and a fast food uniform in his bag. "Got a job," he muttered as he walked past me. I nodded. Didn't gloat. Didn't smirk. Just nodded. Kai followed suit a few days later. Delivery work. Nights and weekends. I heard him on the phone, telling someone he'd take double shifts. His voice cracked on the word scholarship. I think he finally understood that the world doesn't run on promises. It runs on bills. And the ones I used to pay were overdue. A week after that, something changed. I came home to find an envelope on my desk. No name, no note. Just sealed and left beside my keyboard. Inside was a photograph, Evan in his graduation robe. Standing on the stage, holding his diploma, smiling. Not wide, not beaming, but quiet, sincere. Tucked behind it, a scrap of paper. One line, handwritten in uneven script. I realized who was there when no one else was. That was it. No name, no apology, no plea. I stared at the photo for a long time. Not because I forgave him, not because it healed anything, but because it was the first time I felt like my presence, My years of sacrifice had weight. That maybe, just maybe, something had cracked open behind the resentment. I didn't respond. I didn't bring it up at dinner. I didn't show Molly. I took the photo and placed it in the drawer where I used to keep their tuition receipts, their health records, their insurance forms. That drawer was empty now. I didn't do it out of bitterness. I did it for the silence I had finally earned. I began walking differently through the house. Not softer, not seeking approval, not hoping to be seen. Just there, quiet, present, unshaken. Let Molly watch. Let them all watch. I had been the structure, the scaffolding, the roof, the floor. I had carried their weight like it was mine. And when they told me I wasn't their foundation, I let go. Now they understood what absence really feels like. They had built their lives on my back. And the second I stepped aside, the whole thing wobbled. I wasn't vindictive. I didn't cheer at their suffering. But I did feel clarity. You don't get to spit on the hands that hold you and expect to be caught when you fall. So they worked. They stumbled. They scrambled to plug the holes Brandon had poked in the walls with his empty words. And I watched. Steady. Detached. Present but no longer involved. Not one of them has said, "I'm sorry." And that's fine. Because this part of the story isn't about forgiveness. It's about math. About debt. Emotional and financial. And what happens when the man who's been paying realizes no one else has put a single dime into the pot. There's a particular silence that follows betrayal. It's not peace. Not relief. It's the sound of something final. Permanent. Like the last echo inside a cathedral after the doors have been sealed. That's what my house sounds like now. Molly walks through it like a guest, each step careful, deliberate. She doesn't ask me about my day. She doesn't bring up the boys. She used to hum in the mornings while making coffee. Now there's only the rattle of the spoon against ceramic. Measured. Hollow. I don't mind it. There's nothing left to say. The boys still live here. For now. They come and go like phantoms. Their movements muffled by shame. No more sarcastic jabs. No more challenging stares. Evan stays in his room, working late shifts at the burger place off Main. Kai spends his weekends delivering food in the rain. I hear the door open and close at strange hours. I don't ask where they go. I don't ask when they'll be back. It's not my place anymore. Once, I used to text them reminders, dentist appointments, scholarship deadlines, things Brandon never bothered with. Now my phone stays cold. They don't message. I don't check in. They have a father. Let him remember. Let him fail. It's strange how fast a house adjusts to new rules. There was a time when I bent over backwards to keep the illusion intact. Of family, of unity. I used to count how many dinners we had together each week. Now I eat alone. Not out of spite, but because I no longer believe in the meal as ritual. Rituals only matter when the people around the table believe in them too. Molly tries sometimes. She'll cook something and leave it on the stove, pretending she's just being practical. "There's extra if you're hungry," she says without looking at me. I eat when I want. Not to punish. Just to exist on my terms. It's amazing how clear everything becomes once you stop trying to be loved. Once you stop pleading for a seat at a table you built with your own hands. I think that's the hardest part people never talk about. Not the rejection, not even the anger, but the dawning clarity. That love is only noble when it's returned. Otherwise, it's servitude. I spent 8 years serving people who thought my presence was optional. Now they get to learn what absence feels like. Molly asked me once, it was late, the boys were out, if I regretted any of it. If I'd go back and do things differently. Her voice was quiet, careful, like she was afraid the question might wake something dangerous. I told her the truth. I regret letting it go on so long. She didn't reply, just stared at her hands. They were shaking. She never asked again. The truth is, I don't blame the boys entirely. Children mimic what they're shown. And Molly, for all her good intentions, never once stood up for me when it mattered. Not when Brandon undermined me. Not when the boys disrespected me. Not when I was pushed aside, day after day, until all that remained of me was a checkbook and a shadow. She wanted peace. But peace without justice is just a different kind of war. I wonder if she thinks about that now. She asked me, once, if I still considered them mine, if I still saw them as family. I looked her in the eyes and said, no. It wasn't meant to be cruel. Just honest. You can only give so much of yourself before the part that gives begins to die. And mine is gone. Evan came to me last week. I was in the garage, fixing the cabinet hinge that had come loose. I didn't look up when I heard him, just kept tightening the screw. He cleared his throat. I'm trying to apply for reinstatement. The school. They'll let me back next term if I pay the balance. I didn't answer. He shifted. I was wondering if you'd be willing to. No, I said. His jaw tightened. You didn't even let me finish. I didn't need to. He nodded, almost like he expected it. I'm not asking for charity. Yes, you are. I'm trying to fix things. You're trying to fix the consequences, not what caused them. That shut him up. He left without slamming the door. Progress, I suppose. I told Molly later. She said, he's trying. I said, so am I. Trying to remember who I was before this family hollowed me out. She didn't like that, but she didn't argue. There's not much fight left in her these days. Kai's quieter, more careful. He moves like someone afraid of making the floor creak. He hasn't spoken to me directly in weeks. I hear him sometimes, late at night, pacing his room, talking into the phone in a low voice. I think he's afraid, not of me, but of the world outside me. The world where fathers don't pay, where promises don't count, where rent doesn't wait. I used to shield him from that world. Now I let it teach him. Molly asked me what I wanted, what would make things better. I told her nothing. I don't want better. I want truth. I want the silence I earned by finally listening to what they'd been saying all along. That I was never their father. That I didn't belong. Fine. Then I won't act like I do. She asked if I could ever forgive them. I said forgiveness requires admission, acknowledgement, and so far all I've heard is need. Not remorse. Not change. Just requests, framed in softer voices, delivered in lower tones. But the core is the same. They want the version of me that gave without asking. That version is dead. Now I give nothing that isn't earned. Some days, I wonder what it might have felt like to have Evan call me dad and mean it. To have Kai look at me and see someone solid, not a substitute. To have Molly say just once in front of them that I mattered, that I was family. But you can't mourn what never was. Only what you pretended long enough to believe. And I pretended for 8 years. 8 years of birthdays, of scraped knees and soccer games and dentist appointments. 8 years of thanks, Rick, instead of I love you. 8 years of setting the table for people who never brought a single plate. No more. So this is where it ends. Not in fire, not in screaming, but in quiet. In a house that now feels like a museum. In a marriage that functions like a business arrangement. In a family where no one remembers how to look each other in the eye. Molly still sleeps beside me, but the warmth is gone. We talk logistics, not love. Groceries, bills, calendars. I'm her husband in paperwork only. The boys nod when we pass in the hall. Nothing more. They're waiting for me to change my mind. They think this is a phase. It's not. It's the end of the fantasy. The death of delusion. It's what happens when the man they depended on listens, really listens, to the words they thought were harmless. You're not our real dad. They said it. Molly let it stand. And now I've honored their truth. So here's my question. Was I wrong? Was I cruel to stop giving what they were so eager to throw away? Was I heartless to hand the responsibilities back to the father they swore mattered more? Or was this the only way left to teach them what I could never buy? Not with money, not with presents, not with patience? Was this the price of their freedom? Or the first moment they were ever truly held accountable? You tell me, because I've said everything I have to say, and I'm done waiting for thank you.